Once again, good morning, friends. I'm really grateful that you're here. I would like just a wave that you can see the screen and the slide. Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. This morning, we're going to talk about ethics, and ethics is such a broad subject that every time we take this class, and as ministers, we're required to take this class every year. Every time we take this class, we have an opportunity to look at this subject through a different lens. Probably like me, you've taken this class with several different people, and each of us has a slightly different way of looking at ethics. So I hope I will do my best to keep this lively and important and useful for you this morning. So I'm going to begin this morning by inviting you to imagine yourself in this situation. I want you to imagine that an elderly couple has come into your office. You've just completed Sunday service, and an elderly couple has come into your office, smiles on their faces. They've come in and asked for a moment to speak to you, and you close your door and say, of course, happy to speak to you. What's going on? And they explain that they have both been diagnosed with terminal diseases and that their lives will end very quickly, likely within a couple of months. These are older members, they're long-term members, they've been with you for a long time, the whole family is part of your church, and they tell you that they don't want to pass away without one another or leave one another alone, so they've decided to go home and close the garage door and leave the car running and allow themselves to pass together peacefully from this life. They explain to you that they are telling you because you're dear to them and you know that someone will need to take care of their kids afterwards. And they're letting you know, so there's no question that this was a choice. It wasn't an accident. They're letting you know so that you can put the hearts of their children at ease after it happens. And they ask you, of course, we know that you will keep this confidential for us. What do you do in this case? So I want to invite you to just think about that for a minute. What do you do? And if you feel like you have an answer, go ahead and open your mic and share with me.
This is John. I'm leaning toward the ethic of informing if somebody is going to be harmed. In this case, it would be self-harm. I don't think it's like a super black and white. I think other perspectives are, I'm open to hear about too.
Great, thanks, John. Someone else?
This is Brenda from Unity of Omaha. I would have, before the meeting even would have started, I would have just reiterated that I would have to report anything, that's of any kind of nature of harming themselves or others. And then that way it might have set the meeting up for a different outlook, or, they might have decided not to say it. So.
Great, thank you, Brenda. Anybody else?
This is Robin. I think I would tell them my position of needing to report any possibility for self-harm and encourage them to talk with someone in the community who's experienced and qualified to talk with them about that subject. In where I live, I know exactly who I would send them to. And there is the possibility of doing that legally. And if they wanted to consider going to another state where this is legal, that's a possibility.
Great. Thank you, Robin. Anybody else? Anybody willing to admit that in their mind they said, I don't know what I would do? I'll tell you the first time somebody told this story to me, and it was in an ethics class provided to me by an attorney in an ethics conversation. The first time I had to really pause and think, I'm not sure what I would do in this moment. I'm not sure what I would do. I wasn't really clear where my legal boundaries were. And that was a powerful recognition for me, to recognize that I wasn't sure I could back up any of the things that I thought I might do. I knew that my intentions would be in the right place. And I immediately leaned, John, very much towards your opinion. This is self-harm. I need to report this to somebody. But there also is a big ethical consideration and a big legal consideration to this. So the legal consideration that I want you to keep in mind is that when it comes to confidentiality, clergy can be liable for disclosing communication shared with them in confidence without the permission of the counselee. So at this point, they haven't done anything. They've said this is what they're going to do, but they haven't done anything. And it like anything else that's legal, depends on the interpretation of the laws by the court. If I were to speak to someone, I would have to be sure I didn't speak to their family. And that was one of the things I was waiting to hear, was if anybody here said, I think I would probably call their kids and say, we have a problem. Big reasons why we can't call their kids. We have to call for help. Another consideration with this is how well you know this community, this family community, and how much these two people trust you. Perhaps you would say, you know, what I'd like to do is I'd like to get you some medical assistance. You could, at that point, call 911 and have someone come to your church and have them have a conversation and find out whether or not they needed to be taken in for psychiatric evaluation. So you have some choices when it comes to what you do. Ethically, the things that happen in our office behind closed doors are really interesting, aren't they? Sometimes people bring in things we just don't expect. And this particular situation is not far-fetched. It's the kind of thing people face in today's world. So when we talk about ethics, ethics are also called moral philosophy. They have to do with our values. Moral philosophy is the discipline concerned with what is morally good or bad, or right or wrong. And the term is applied to any system or theory of moral values or principles. So what do we mean when we talk about moral values? Because we just kind of go down the rabbit hole, don't we? So moral values are just practices and teachings that are how we control and direct the actions that we take in life. And all of us have them. Moral examples include how you run your family, your individual duties in the family, who believes that who is responsible for what, how you engage in sexual activity, things like property rights, what you believe as a society about property. What is your property? Very different. Some of us would think about the Samoan culture, where everything belongs to everyone. In that culture, it's not at all unusual to walk up to somebody's porch and take something off the porch, take a shovel, take a rake, take whatever, take a chair because you're going to sit down the street. Not unusual in some cultures because their property rights values are different than ours. If someone were to come to our porch and take something off, we would be offended because in our moral society, that's wrong, in the morals and values of our society. Personal welfare is another one that in some societies like ours, we take great responsibility for each other's personal welfare. In other societies, people are individually able to make decisions for their life without the interference of other people. So understanding your culture is really important. Truth-telling and promise-keeping is another one, and that's valuable for us to think about in terms of what it is that we believe when it comes to our spiritual leadership. Where are we in our moral values around truth-telling and promise-keeping? Among all societies, moral values are nearly universal. Some of those that are nearly universal are murder, theft, infidelity, things like that. But when we talk about ethics, we're running ethics through two kinds of moral values: the moral values that belong to us personally, and the moral values that belong to us as a society. So our societal standards, the society that we are on this screen today, our societal standards are set by Unity Worldwide Ministries. We have an entire code available to us. I want you to ask yourself, no need to say it publicly, when was the last time you reviewed Unity Worldwide Ministries Code of Ethics? When was the last time you looked at it? Because we all sign it. We've all read it. We've all been taught about it. We all know that it's part of what we are required to follow. But it's very easy to get away from that code of ethics, to get away from reading it and reviewing it and being familiar with it in light of the jobs that we do. Our jobs require a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort. And so I want to encourage you, you'll see that it's very easy to find. Just go to our website and put in Code of Ethics and it will come up. Very, very easy to find and really worthy of an annual read. And I suggest to you that you put it on your calendar. Choose a date. You can choose today. Put it on your calendar, read it once, and put it on your calendar for once a year so that there's a reminder, because you'll get away from it. And the answer to so many of the questions that we have will be found in our agreed upon Code of Ethics. And that's the fact that we agree to it is, it's our promise, isn't it? When we talk about truth telling and keeping our promise, we are bound to, by our word, follow this Code of Ethics. So Unity's Code of Ethics will cover our belief system, what it is that Unity says we believe, which we all know, we have our personal beliefs, and then we have things that we translate our personal beliefs through. And those greater beliefs are the beliefs that we, again, have agreed are part of what we will present as Unity ministers and Unity leaders. Self-care is covered in that. For me, is one of the most important reasons to go back and look at our Code of Ethics, because self-care is covered in our Code of Ethics. We are required to take care of ourselves in order to do our job. And if you are a board president or a spiritual leader in your community, if you happen to be an LUT, but board presidents in particular, your ministers are bound by a Code of Ethics related to self-care, and you need to know what that Code of Ethics says. Because when they ask for spiritual renewal time, it's not just because they need a vacation. It's because they have made a commitment to take care of themselves so that they can bring their best selves to the job each day in all the ways that they serve the community. So it's valuable not only for the ministers, but also for your board to be familiar with this Code of Ethics and to really understand what it means and the value and importance of self-care for ministers and for all levels of leadership in your community. Authority and power is covered in our Code of Ethics. How do we lead? How do we relate to everyone else? The relationship that we have with others and the authority, where the authority lies, where the decision-making power lies, and how we respect one another in relation to that is all laid out in our Code of Ethics. And confidentiality. What does confidentiality mean to Unity Worldwide Ministries is very different than what it might mean to us. Because this is where our word is. Our promise and commitment is that we will keep confidence in the direction that Unity Worldwide Ministries has asked us to, and we have signed that piece of paper. Sexual conduct is outlined, a very important subject in today's very litigious world. Understanding what what is and is not appropriate, important and valuable and available in our code of ethics, and how our review system works. If there is an ethical breach, who takes care of that? How do we handle that? It's laid out in our code of ethics. And there's much more available to us. This code of ethics is written, as most documents are, to cover a broad scope of information. But another thing that's really important about reviewing it is going back to see if it changed since you signed it. Has anything been adjusted or updated by Unity Worldwide Ministries? And do you now, as you signed this when you went into ministry, do you now, having all the experience of being a minister under your belt, does anything need more explanation for you? Do you have questions about what's in that code of ethics that you really want to make sure you're straight on, so you can keep the commitments and promises that you made as a Unity leader? If you had recently read this, the answer to the question would be very easy. The answer to the case I gave you, Unity's Code of Ethics in item 3-E under confidentiality says, I am honor bound to hold sacred all confidences reposed in me, except if a confidence reveals that a person confiding may pose a threat to self or others. It's right there in our code of ethics. There's no question. I will abide by law mandating or authorizing reporting to agencies. It's not a question. We have agreed to this already. In addition, where law shields from liability, voluntary disclosure of suspected possible child abuse, elder abuse, and this could be elder abuse, couldn't it? Because we don't know who's made the decision to park in the car. We don't know that neither person is under pressure from the other. We don't know that both of these individuals want this. Elder abuse, dependent adult abuse, or animal abuse, which is important to know, may have slipped out of your mind. I will make a good faith report of such abuse to the appropriate agencies, whether or not reporting is mandated by law. That's what we agreed to. So if we were taken to a court of law and someone said, well, you reported me because I said I kicked my dog and I feel bad about it, but I didn't break any laws. Yeah, I reported you because whether or not I feel mandated by law, or whether or not I know if it's mandated by law, which is equally important, I have agreed that I will make a good faith report of such abuse. So whether or not you know for sure what the law says about any kind of abuse that comes to you, you have agreed that you will report it, that you will take steps to stop it from happening. And that's important to note. If you go through our code of ethics, every single line tells you something incredibly valuable that allows you to be a better decision maker in your community. And if you find something in that code of ethics that you don't agree with, you need to have a conversation with somebody at Unity Worldwide Ministries, whether it's a consultant or one of the service offices, or maybe you call Shad himself and talk to him. But if your signature is on the bottom of this piece of paper, it means that you have agreed to follow this code of ethics. And Unity cannot back you up if you are out of line with this code of ethics. This protects you. In every sense of the word, it protects you. And it also gives you the guidance you need to make good choices. It's your job to know the UWM code of ethics. That's really what I'm saying. It's your job to know this. And the reason that we take this class every year is not just because it gives us an opportunity to expand into possibility and to practice what being in an ethical position means, but also to remind us, come back to the code of ethics, come back to the code of ethics. This is where you find your protection. It's also where you find your information about how to ethically run your ministry. I want to talk, and when we sent out the letter, we talked about this, about pastoral care confidentiality and what pastoral care is and what it isn't. This is kind of an area of expertise for me. It's an area I care very much about. One of the reasons it's an area of expertise for me is I spent 12 years running an interfaith seminary, and I needed to really understand when I sent ministers out in the world what they needed in the way of pastoral care. I work very closely with and am a big, strong proponent of an organization called Church Law and Tax. If you're not familiar with that organization, I will be sending you after this class a list of articles that will take you straight to their website, and you can click on membership and find out about them. Membership in Church Law and Tax runs about $130, $129, I think, a year. And what you get for your membership is access to their complete library. Plus, you get updates on tax laws and all kinds of stuff. I get nothing from them. Disclaimer here, I get nothing from them. They are an incredible resource when it comes to making decisions about how you move forward with various areas of your community. So according to Church Law and Tax, churches face a number of legal risks when they offer counseling services by ministers or laypersons. These include negligent selection, retention, or supervision of a counselor who engages in sexual misconduct or negligent counseling. A church may also be vicariously liable for a counselor's failure to report child abuse, breach of confidentiality, and breach of fiduciary relationship. These are important things for you to consider. When we talk about ethics, we are talking about the ethics of following the law, and we have the moral code that's given to us by Unity Worldwide Ministries and the societal code that is given to us through our legal system. These things are important to consider on both ends, and you again have responsibility to keep yourself aware of what the laws are and how the laws pertain to the work that you do. I know if I were sitting on the other side of the screen, I would think, I have 1,000 things to do. How am I possibly going to keep up with all of the laws that apply? There aren't that many, surprisingly. There, because of separation of church and state, because of the way we do things, there are a lot of laws that don't apply to us. But there are some really important ones that we should be aware of, and those largely relate to how we engage in pastoral care. And you'll notice that I'm saying pastoral care rather than pastoral counseling. And that's because the words guide us in different levels of understanding about the background that's being brought in to any particular conversation. Mental health laws change from state to state. They actually vary dramatically. Generally, pastors employed in a church are free to provide pastoral counseling to church members and are exempt from church licensing. However, being exempt from church licensing does not mean the same thing as being exempt from the state coming in and overseeing negligence. There are laws that are relevant to anyone who says they do any kind of counseling. In the state of Colorado, where I'm in Colorado Springs, we have laws for unlicensed therapists, unlicensed psychologists, unlicensed counselors. So I would be considered an unlicensed counselor. In my state, if I register with the state as an unlicensed counselor, which I have done, and someone files a complaint with the state against me, the worst that can happen to me is that the state says, I'm sorry, you can no longer do any kind of counseling at all. You are not allowed to do that anymore because I have registered. If a grievance is filed against me in the state of Colorado and I have not registered and I am found in any way negligent, it's a $10,000 fine because I didn't take the time to file one little bitty piece of paper. And it's actually a very simple piece of paper. It doesn't ask for a whole lot. But if you don't know this, you have no way of protecting yourself. So finding out what the mental health licensing laws are in your state, if you offer pastoral counseling or anyone in your community is offering pastoral counseling or care, it's important to know what your state says so that you can ethically meet your requirement in your state. States differ in their exemption from licensing for lay persons who might provide counseling for your community. Who would be lay persons? A layperson who might engage in counseling without even realizing they're doing it is your youth leader. Your youth leader who might be called into a confidential conversation by a child in your community. Have you had a conversation of any level with your youth leader about how that would be handled? It's important to know because we're usually busy doing Sunday service while our kids are off with their youth leader. We don't know what all the phone calls are. We don't know how often somebody stays after, especially with our YOU. And while Unity Worldwide Ministries provides exceptional training for our youth leaders, we have responsibility in our church to know how our youth leaders would handle it if someone came to them and said, "Can I talk to you about something personal?" Trust is a really good thing. Busyness is a very important consideration, and this is part of our responsibility. There are particular ways that you can get yourself caught up in this. One of them is that licensing exemptions are changed if you charge a fee for counseling. If you actually have a presented scale of cost, you can ask for a donation. But if you charge for counseling, you in many states fall under different laws. And that's true in Colorado, for those of you that are in Colorado. Providing or advertising pastoral or lay counseling services to the general public. If you say pastoral counseling is available in your program that you hand out on Sunday, no problem. If it's on your public website, that could be considered advertising to the public that you provide available services and counseling unless you say for congregation members. So that you're very specific about who you will counsel with and who you will not. I strongly, based just on what I've learned here in Colorado, strongly recommend that you have a policy of counseling people who are in your congregation rather than outside of it. Because the more I've looked at it, the more laws I see that are relevant to that. There is a little bit more protection if you're serving the community and it's very clear how you interact with the people in your community. Using titles or descriptions of services. That's really important. The words that you use, therapist, counseling, psychology, even if it's things like energy psychology or eco-spiritual psychology, any of those great buzzwords that are being used in the spiritual world right now, if the word psychology appears anywhere in what you're promoting, unless you are licensed, be very careful. Because you can put yourself in hot water with the law. There's a book on the market called Youth Workers Guide that is oriented. It's written by two gentlemen who have together more than 40 years of experience in youth leadership. And they're very specific in that book, which is a book, again, recommended through church law and tax. So I have every reason to believe that formally, legally, it falls in line with the laws that would be relevant to us. In Van Pelt and Hancock's book, they recommend no use of the term counseling should be allowed unless staff are formally trained and currently licensed to provide clinical counseling services. That's a big one. Many of us talk about counseling. The recommendation is, especially with youth, and I would offer you the consideration that in your scope of ministry overall, we can save ourselves a lot of grief by taking the word counseling out of what we do and referring to pastoral care, really talking about pastoral care. the idea of pastoral care sounds very different, doesn't it? It has an entirely different feel to it. Instead, Van Pelt and Hancock recommend using terms like helping relationships. They are Christian writers. They talk about discipling relationships. They talk about mentoring relationships. Very different word. If you need some mentoring, some coaching, some pastoral care, you are welcome to schedule some time with me. I'd be happy to mentor you. I'd be happy to coach you a little bit on what's going on for you. I'd be happy to hear you and provide pastoral care to the best of my trained ability. Those things really, really help. The verbiage that we use really matters. So what are your state laws? How do you find out what your state laws are? This was actually a really big challenge for me when I started my seminary. It was a huge challenge to figure out how do I even begin this? So I'm going to give you a few places to start. Through the Secretary of State's office, I was able to have a conversation. There was nothing on the Secretary of State page that really gave me what I needed, but they were able to send me through to Colorado's mental health department. And at that time, which was early 1999, a long time ago, all of the laws that were relevant to me were listed in the mental health department guide. And I was able to just call and have them send me a copy of that. I had to read through a bunch of stuff. There was a ton of stuff in there that had nothing to do with me. And what I found were two conflicting laws, one that said ministers didn't have to be licensed very clearly, and one that defined me as an unlicensed minister and required me to register with the state as an unlicensed minister. So I looked deeper at licensure laws and certification laws and could not get an answer, and ended up finding a minister who was also an attorney who went through the laws with me and basically said, you're absolutely right. The state has two conflicting laws, and it's going to depend on who is the judge in a case that affects you if you are brought before a judge at any time, if there's a grievance at any time. So what his suggestion to me was, you're never going to go wrong because you registered as an unlicensed provider. That's never going to hurt you. Not registering as unlicensed could definitely cause you a problem. And that's the choice I went through. If I were to look today, I would go back in and look under licensure laws first, mental health licensure laws in your state. It will take a little while to go through. It's legalese. It's difficult to understand. Where you will not find it is under the word minister. Most things do not say minister. Most things say clergy. So when you go to look, if you want to put in clergy, pastoral counseling, licensing laws, you'll probably get closer than if you put in minister. And I think that's because in so many other countries, the word minister is used in politics, but clergy covers a broad base, and that seems to be the word that's most often used in the political world. I really cannot say more strongly to you how important I think it is for you to go and find out what these laws are that apply to your pastoral services, and most especially if you provide pastoral counseling. The world is strange right now, and we all know that ministers are always scrutinized. And what we do is we're expected to hold a higher standard than other people, and because of the work that we do, that's natural. But in this particular area, the jeopardy is not only to you, it's to your church. If for some reason something goes wrong in a counseling session, something happens and you're pulled up for grievance, the church can have to pay fines, and that'll be unexpected. Most of your boards will not recognize how they are in jeopardy unless you go through this process and find out what your laws say, and potentially make adjustments to your words, and really consider how you want to be in service to your community. And for those of you who are here who are board leaders, I want to say this as well. Pastoral counseling is one of the most challenging and difficult things that ministers do, and it's the most invisible to you. Your ministers are behind closed doors. They're dealing with people's very challenging life experiences, and the level to which ministers can be taxed by that is high. It's valuable to remember that your ministers do some things that are some of the most important aspects of the work that they provide. And while they're doing it, they sometimes are carrying a load. There was a great article, I'm not sure, it might have been you, Eliza, who posted it yesterday on the Unity Ministers list, on the minister discussion list on Facebook, that talked about the departure from ministry and what it is to carry the knowledge of your community, what it is to know what's going on, who's sick, who's just lost somebody, who's struggling with a potential divorce, who's having troubles with drug abuse in their household, what all of the combined weight of that can be. When we go back to following the Unity Code of Ethics and the area of self-care, this is why, because it's so much more than just speaking on Sunday and making sure your building is clean and managing a staff of people. There's such tremendous amount of caring, and compassion fatigue is a real thing, and it affects ministers. So ministers, remember that. And those of you who work with ministers, hold a compassionate heart for the good work that they do. So going back now, we've explored personal ethics just a little, because we all have our own. And we've talked a lot about Unity's Code of Ethics and our subscription to it, our promise to keep those, to live by and lead our ministries by that Code of Ethics. Who else is affected by UWM's Code of Ethics? Because we know that we signed it, but who is this written for? It's right, it's the top section of our Code of Ethics. In harmony with Unity Worldwide Ministries ethics policy, this Code of Ethics applies to the following: all credentialed leaders, licensed or ordained Unity ministers, licensed Unity teachers. Have you gone over this with your licensed Unity teacher? Do you guys have a regular conversation about your Code of Ethics? All non-credentialed leaders serving in the capacity of a credentialed Unity leader. I know, because I was uncredentialed when I began, that this Code of Ethics was sent to me and I needed to sign it. I also can tell you not a single person went over it with me. It was sent to me, I needed to sign it. If you're a board of directors, if you're a board leader, you want to make sure that somebody that you guys have talked through this Code of Ethics, and that if your uncredentialed leader has any questions, that you make sure they hook up with somebody at Unity Worldwide Ministries and have this discussion. I also want to go back to what I said about licensed Unity teachers and having a discussion there. Unity Worldwide Ministries can only do so much. I know that some of us feel like they do everything they can do. Some of us feel like they could do more. Without getting into any judgment about that, when you think about what it takes to just run your ministry, you can imagine into how big it might be to run Unity Worldwide Ministries. Sometimes it's easy for us to step back and assume that UWM will do things for us. And one of those could be that they will have, as the licensed Unity teachers were trained, they will have been trained around this Code of Ethics. And there's probably truth to that. But how many of you have a teacher working in your community who has been there for several years and maybe hasn't gone back and visited this Code of Ethics? In the same way that I recommend to you that you go through your Code of Ethics every year, I recommend to you that you bring together the people that are affected by it and you have a conversation about it. And you make sure that this is available to them and that they understand it's a resource for decision making, and it's also what protects them. Also covered are all ministerial candidates from all affiliated Unity schools. Once you enter training, you're expected to follow this code of ethics. All members of our UWM Board of Trustees. And whoops, I missed one. Did I get to it? Oh, I did miss one. Right in between those two. This is a really powerful and important one. All member ministries and expansion ministries. That means, what does that mean? All ministries. Well, they already said ministers, so they're not going to talk to you about ministers again, are they? What does it mean that your ministry is responsible to follow this code of ethics? Does that mean your board is responsible for this code of ethics? I would say yes. Does that mean your youth teachers, your youth director, and the teachers working with your kids are responsible to follow this code of ethics? Yes, I would say yes. Does that mean your team leadership? I would say yes. What does this mean to our ministry? You have the opportunity to share this code of ethics with anyone in your ministry. To make this a public document that's posted on a bulletin board that is offered to anybody in any leadership position. Because ultimately, UWM is saying this applies to everybody in your ministry. You have an opportunity to really use this to teach from, to talk about the ethics and the moral code of your individual community and how you'll relate with one another and what you can expect from one another. And importantly, what your minister, what the people in your congregation can expect from you ethically. If in going back to our beginning conversation, if this had been in that particular church, a well-known document, then the people who came to the office would have known right away that any kind of self-harm would require action from the minister. It's very clear. All UWM staff members, all individuals certified as consultants in our ministries, all members of UWM ministry team. I have a hard time, I don't know about you guys, I have a hard time thinking about who's not covered by this. This code of ethics is really a powerful document for us. And again, knowing who's covered by it helps us not only as we go down into our ministries, but it tells us what we can expect from the leadership that we look to for guidance. It speaks about our relationship with other ministers and with people who have authority and power, and what we can expect from UWM coming down to us. This document, again, I've said it and I'll try to stop beating a dead horse, but it's really important to know what's in here. Do you have a code of ethics for your staff and your ministry? Have you even thought about having that conversation? It's important to consider how you would have that conversation and what the morals of your ministry are, not because they'll differ from Unity's code of ethics, but because you might reward some of it to speak to how teams will respect each other and the relationship that the licensed Unity teacher has, and how you share sacred space and how you care for your building, for example, might be part of your code of ethics. That we keep the environment in our building a certain way because this is where people come to pray, and this is where people come to grieve, and this is also where people come to celebrate. So part of our code of ethics, our right and wrong for our community, is that we hold this space sacred. And that means that we agree to do whatever is necessary. If we see something out of place, we agree to pick it up and put it back, whether we put it out of place or not. Because it's how we care for each other and how we make sure that our sacred space is always in good shape. So when people come in, they're not distracted by the mess. They're able to come into our sacred space and bring an open heart in whatever condition they're in on that particular day. So we've talked about a lot. I'm going to provide a couple of things to you. I'm actually pretty proud of myself. We're going to get out of here on time. We've talked about a lot today. If you have questions, I'm hoping you will bring them to our mid-month conversation. It will be the third Wednesday of the month. Before I get to that, you're going to receive 2 follow-up documents from me. The first you're going to receive is a list of articles. Not all of them, but many of them are on the church tax and law, or church law and tax site. So it will take you right to the site. Some of those articles are available to the general public. Some you have to have a membership to read, but I'm sending them all to you so that if you make the choice to be a member, you'll have access. And either way, I can assure that you get to the site and get familiar with it. I'm also going to send you a document that I use that's a professional disclosure statement. And a professional disclosure statement is a requirement for me if you want to do pastoral care with me. The first thing I'm going to give you is a disclosure statement. And that disclosure statement tells you that my degrees are unaccredited, that I am not a psychologist or therapist of any kind, where my seminarial degrees came from, what my training is, that I have the authority of Unity as an ordained minister to serve the congregation. It tells if you set an appointment with me, how long the appointment will be. It tells that I will not charge you, that you're welcome to make a donation. There's a recommended donation, but that you are not required to make a donation to the church. That there's no fee for my time. It tells you to please cancel within 24 hours so that I have time to reschedule. And it walks through a grievance period, the grievance process. And what you'll notice on it is that I have listed Unity Worldwide Ministries as the place to take a grievance. And I have also listed, in my case, Tony Bain, because Tony Bain was at the time that I was at Unity Worldwide Ministries, she was my consultant. And so I have given them 2 places to make a grievance before they go to the state. Why? Because I don't want them to go to the state. My ethical considerations are with Unity Worldwide Ministries. The code of ethics I follow is with Unity Worldwide Ministries, and Unity Worldwide Ministries is best going to judge whether I'm following the code of ethics or not. So if someone is going to file a grievance against me, I want them to go there first. So that I will send you a copy of my personal document so that you can look at it and you can consider whether it's something that you want to use with your community or not. The other thing that's on that document is a clear statement that I don't file any records for any pastoral care sessions I do. The only thing that I keep on record is this document. And I keep this document because it says you knew exactly what my background is, exactly how I provide services, exactly what was expected to you surrounding fees, and that I would not keep records, so you could not call me into court to ask me to testify because I keep no records. So I will send each of you that document, and you are welcome to adjust it for your own community. I have taken it to my own attorney here. He was very comfortable with it. It is not a legal document. It's a self-protection document. But if you have any concerns about it, like I said about all of this, if you have an attorney in your community, talk to them about ethics and about laws in your state that are related to ministry. Educate yourself. When you come in at the middle of the month, for those of you who choose to join us again, we will have a conversation, and we're going to talk about how we ethically move through some real life situations, like I already have one child with Down syndrome. I'm pregnant. Should I keep this child or not? I can't make this decision. I need guidance. End of life decisions. Someone spoke about assisted suicide. That's a really big consideration. It's legal here in Colorado. I've had those conversations. Trans debates that come up in your community. I've had many of those, having had a couple of congregants who were trans. What do you do when when a woman who was born biologically male wants to attend your women's gathering, your women's retreat? How do you handle that? What are your ethical considerations? Another thing that's come up for us that was a big one was all of the conversation around gambling, because our particular community ran a bingo game. And what are the ethics around feeding into people's gambling addictions? Do we have ethical considerations there? How do we manage that? So we're going to talk about those and some confessional issues. If somebody comes in and says, I did this thing 40 years ago, do you have legal responsibility and ethical consideration to who you tell, how you tell? How do you make these decisions? So we're going to play in the field of some difficult conversations, and I'll get you interacting with each other so that we can see how decisions are made in the moment, because these are not easy decisions. How we handle these things really matters. How we find the right words for the people that come to us with torn open hearts and still follow the ethical considerations that lie before us. Really, really important stuff. So as I said, I'll send you some documents. After this, you can review those. I'd love to see you in the middle of the month. And if you have any questions, you can reach me. I will, on that letter that I send you, my email will be there. So you can reach me through that email. That way you're coming right through my business mastermind, and I won't lose you in the other crazy things I do in life. All right. We're at 3 minutes after. Anybody got a burning something they need to ask before we close down? All right. For those of you I don't see at the middle of the month, it's been my pleasure to meet you and spend this time with you. I wish you a blessed day, and thank you so much for the gift of your time. I'll see you soon.